In my 9 years of running a jewelry business, I've stocked many shops and galleries, but should you do the same? In this video, I'm going to go over the pros and cons and talk about my experience so you can see if it's the right move for you. Make sure you stick around to the end because I'm going to share my biggest takeaway and what I've learned from doing this. So let's look at some pros. First of all, obviously your jewelry is going to get seen by a whole lot more people if it's sitting in a beautiful display in a shop rather than sitting in your storage cupboard at home. This obviously does depend, on the location of the shop itself and the amount of footfall that it gets, but generally shops that you stock, you'd hope to stock ones that are in a decent area so that they're going to get a good amount of footfall. What this does is it helps your brand to get recognized. I'm very particular and I don't stock shops that don't show my name. So I've gone around, when I've been looking for shops and seen that some of them have their brand name on the wall and they don't have any of the names of the designers, and they kind of come across as though it's their different collections of the same brand underneath the shop name. So I personally don't like doing that because one of the main benefits is your brand recognition. So when you have your jewelry in a shop, people may see it, they may not buy it on the spot, but they might take a business card or note down your name or find you on Instagram, and then they can come to you afterwards. Maybe they want a commission piece or a shorter chain on something, or they just want to buy it at a later stage. So I find this a really great way to also increase your marketing. So obviously when it's in the shop, they're selling, the pieces are being sold in the shop, but then they also can potentially add on to that and be sold directly to the customer on your own website. So it's very important to have the same price in the shop and on your website. So this gives continuity, so you're not undercutting the shop. So when your jewelry is sold much cheaper on your website than it is in the shop will become unhappy and they will then not necessarily want to continue working with you if you are completely undercutting them and people are saying, oh, I can get it much cheaper on their website. So it's really good to have the same price there, and then it's a win-win situation because, for example, maybe the shop doesn't have the piece that they want, but then the shop can say, I'll get in touch with the designer, see if they can make it up for you or anything like that, and you build a really nice working relationship with the shop. And then next up we have consignment. So consignment is also known as sale return, where essentially after each month you will then invoice the shop and they will then pay you for the items that have sold. But you still own all of your jewelry, but then they will return whatever they don't want after X amount of period, however long you've had it in there and you've agreed, okay, this isn't working or these pieces aren't selling, then they'll give it back to you. As opposed to wholesale, where they just go and buy it outright and then it's theirs. They can do what they want with it. They can put on sale. They can, do whatever they want with it. They own it. And then it's not your concern because you've made your money and you're good to go, and you can reinvest that money into your further and future collections, which is great. So often shops will not necessarily want to start with buying it outright. It makes total sense because they want to test your jewelry. They want to see if it's the right market. They want to see if it's the right fit for their shop. And if it's selling great, then awesome. Then they're going to buy more, and then maybe they'll want to buy it from you further down the line. But also for you, maybe it's, then it's, if it doesn't really work and it's just a one-off thing, then, you want to also make sure that it's going to be a good relationship for you as well as them. So what I like to do is initially when I have the conversation with a shop is I say, great, I totally understand if they do consignment, then I'll say, can we review it in 3 months or so and see if things are selling really well, and then maybe we can move to buying it if they feel like it's a good it's a good fit and it's going to work. So this is something that can be negotiated. Not all shops are flexible to it, but you need to speak to the shop and, once you have a good relationship with them as well, because it really is a lot to do with building really good relationships with them as well. So another pro about stocking shops is that if you are getting regular orders from them and things are selling there, then you're able to budget a little bit more and you can know, okay, this shop always brings me in a couple of hundred, this shop brings me an X amount, and you can start to understand how much to be making ahead of time and also how much money you'll be getting in and what you can be reinvesting. Another pro with doing big orders is that you literally pack it all up in one box, you ship ship it once, so you don't need to be packing everything individually, and you don't need to be going to the post office every other day, and you can just ship it all once. So that's really nice and environmentally friendly as well in terms of shipping. And if they're close by, you can go and take the box to them and drop it off in person, and that's great. So that is a pro as well. So less time wasted going to the post office. When I initially started, obviously I made everything myself. So I was very excited to be stocking shops when I started, but I had to make everything myself. But now I have a manufacturer, which really helps to speed that whole process up in terms of stocking shops, and it makes me really excited to get orders rather than being worried that I can fulfill them or not. So that is also really nice. So for example, if I have one of my designs made, say a ring for example, and that costs 20 for the manufacturer to make, then I would get that from her for 20, then I could wholesale that at 50 and the retail would be 100, and I would go home with a profit of 30. And in this way, I haven't had to make the ring, I haven't had to do any of the marketing, and I still get to make a profit and run a jewelry business. In this way, it's still handmade because the manufacturer that I use, it's all handmade, really good quality. And it is still my designs. I carved the initial piece, or I made the initial piece, and then instead of me replicating it 50 times, they are replicating it, but it's exactly to my specifications. It's the exact piece that I made that they use as a starting point. So this is really great, and it still allows me to build that business and grow things a whole lot faster than if I was doing each piece individually myself. For example, earlier this month, I got an order of 70 pieces. So in your mind, think now, would you prefer to either make, ship, package, and sell each of those pieces individually, each of those 70 pieces, or would you prefer to do that all in one big order, package it all up and send it off in one go? So have a think what you feel would work better for you, the way you prefer working, and what works better for you. So you may not want to start with stocking shops on large scale, but you maybe want to build up to that in the future. So a lot of this has to do with the type of business that you want to be running. Obviously, this doesn't happen overnight, and back in the day when I started, there's no ways I would have been able to keep up with 70-piece orders from one shop, let alone all the other shops that needed things as well, as I still had my day job, but now I welcome these regular orders. So let's move on to cons. So the first thing that jumps to our mind is obviously the big cut that shops take. But if we think about it, they have their overheads to pay, they have their water, electricity, their staff to pay, they have their rent to pay, they have to upkeep the shop, they have to, replace displays, they have to do lots of things that cost a lot of money to keep their doors open. And also, depending on where the shop's located, those rent prices can be really, really high. So for me, from a younger age, I realized that this is something that I'm okay with, because it meant that it took a lot of responsibility off my hands, and it was something that I was willing to go into. This percentage that they take can be negotiated sometimes. From my experience, it's always between 15% and 60%. Kind of gives you an idea of what to expect in terms of if you're getting a good deal or if you're being ripped off. 60 is definitely on the higher end, but then you need to see what price you're selling your jewelry for, and if you're okay with that markup, and if you can still make a profit from that, and it sells, then great, then that can totally work for you as well. Some shops take less, but then sometimes they have other requirements. For example, here in Belgium, some of the shops charge a lower percentage, but then they expect you to work a day a week or however often in the shop itself, or they have like a monthly fee and they take a lower percentage. So this is quite a common thing in Belgium. I'm not sure if it is where you are in your country, but there are so many different things to consider, and you can have a discussion with the shop, and you need to be very clear on what's okay for you. So knowing your bottom line, like where you start not making a profit anymore and just actually making a loss, then it's not worth your while. So even if it would mean stocking a shop, if it means you're not going to make any profit, then there's totally no point in doing it. So you need to be very clear on that, and you're like, no, this is as far as I'm going to go in terms of that percentage. So if they're doing a 50%, and you have a 2 times markup for your retail, then you're good, basically, right? So you've accounted for all of that cost that the shop is going to take, because in the end, the shop still needs to make money off selling your goods. So if they're only earning like a couple of pounds, dollars, euros, then chances are they're going to be like, how much do I need to sell for this to be worth taking up that space? You know what I mean? Like I mentioned before with consignment, where they're not buying the jewelry from you, and if you haven't done your research and found the shop that has the same target audience as you and is the right fit for your brand, then what can happen is you don't get many sales, and after a couple of months you go in and you check and your jewelry is tarnished, and obviously it's not going to be selling if it's looking tarnished like that, but obviously the shop isn't going to be cleaning your jewelry and making sure it's looking all shiny and, you know, beautiful. But if it's sitting there for long periods of time and it's not selling, then your jewelry should definitely rather be taken out of that shop and put in a better shop that fits your brand better, or just sold directly on your own website. So there's no point being in a shop if it's not actually working for you. With consignment, it can also tie up a lot of your income. So you know how you would reinvest your profits back into your business from what has been sold. So this way it can tie up a lot of your money and slow down your growth so that the business can't grow as fast as you would like it to. So if you can, it's always ideal to try and get the shop to buy it if you can. And another thing to consider that could be a con for you is if you've been selling B2C, which means business to customer, so that's retail, then you have obviously worked out your prices according to what you're happy to get as a profit on top of the cost. So maybe what you've been doing is working out the cost of your jewelry and then just doubling that, so half is cost and then half is your profit. That works great if you're selling direct to the customer, and that will keep your prices lower. Obviously I have a whole video on pricing, but just this is kind of something that came up in a lot of the questions people had about raising your prices. So if you want to be selling directly to the customer, sure, then your markup can be lower. But if you then decide you want to move into shops, which is what I did at one point, and I went to, it was actually a full jeweler, it wasn't like a boutique with different things, it was all jewelry in there, and I went, these are my prices, and this is my markup, and this is the cost. We discussed all of this because it's like, it's the first shop I'm stocking, and she was like, oh my goodness, your prices are way too low, like you basically need to redo everything if you want to stock the shop, otherwise you're going to be making an absolute loss. Then I was like, oh my goodness, because obviously all my prices had been like that for a few years. Can't remember exactly at that point how many years I'd been already selling for direct to customer. But I basically had to redo my pricing, and it was a big jump. It was basically almost double what I had been selling it for, because I had really been trying to price my jewelry according to what my friends can afford and you know, trying to make it as cheap as possible, so only taking a very small profit, which is great and fine if you're selling direct, and that can work. Then when you make that move, then be aware that you will need to change that pricing. So what you can do is slowly build up that price and increase your prices over a couple of years if you know you do want to go towards that. Another con to consider is that you will need to basically sell more jewelry to make the same amount. So like I was just mentioning with how much markup and how much profit you get, if you are selling your jewelry to a shop, you will get less money than you are if you're selling direct to the customer through your website, for example. So you will need to make more jewelry to end up making the same amount of money in the end. So in that way, that's also something to think about. Is this something you're willing to do? Is this something you're happy to do? So weighing up these pros and cons, trying to help you make the decision what's best for you and your business right now. Doesn't mean it needs to stay like that, but these are things just to consider. And another con is completely out of your control, but a shop may suddenly decide to stop stocking your work. Could be because they're shutting down, could be they're moving, something's changing, they don't want your jewelry anymore, whatever it might be. This is just something to consider. So don't get too attached to, oh my goodness, this is the one shop, the only shop, and you know, this is it for me. But do keep in mind that these things are out of your control and sometimes can happen. But actually saying that, you can actually do a lot to control what your relationship is like with that shop owner to ensure that this doesn't happen to you. And another important thing to think about is that it does take a lot of time to do your homework and do your research to find the right shops for you. I can't emphasize enough how important it is to find the right shops for your brand. So knowing your target audience and knowing what your brand stands for makes it so much easier to go out there and see straight away, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. So when I go out and look for shops, I automatically look through the door. I'm like, no, not that one. Yep, that one. And I don't even waste my time going into the other ones that I don't think are a right fit for me, because I know it's not going to sell well there, because the people who are drawn to that shop are not the right people for my jewelry. Obviously, before I started working with my manufacturer, I was really scared to go out and approach new shops because I was like, oh my goodness, there's no ways I'm going to keep up with these orders. At the time, like I said, I had a job as well on the side for part of the time that I was starting out, and I was terrified to go find more shops than I had because there was no way I was going to keep up with the demand. So recently, I actually sat down and did an hour-long video with my manufacturer talking about exactly what you would need to get started working with her. This video, along with all of her details, are available to the students in the academy, along with everything you'll need to start stocking your first few shops. Even before I started making jewelry and stocking shops with it, I used to have a business where I changed secondhand clothes, chopped them up and sewed them and turned them into something else, and I stocked shops with that. So I have been stocking shops for so long that I have learned so many things along the way that have helped me really build those relationships with the shops, and I know what they expect from you and what they appreciate from you. So my absolute biggest takeaway is to make their life as easy as possible. So making things as smooth and easy for them to do as possible goes a long way in building that relationship with them. And finally, I have a small favor to ask from you, which is I see that 61% of viewers are not subscribed, and I have a goal by the end of the year. I would absolutely love to reach 7,000 subscribers. So if you are watching this and you find this video valuable or any of my other content, I would really appreciate you subscribing.